Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Conesville. Thank you for showing up tonight. It's a little hot. We're sorry. We do have refreshments, and I'm in the process of getting some water and things, so that'll be here in a few minutes. So thank you for coming to Conesville. Before we get started with tonight's program, we want to give you a heads up on two other things that are upcoming. This Saturday, we have an ice cream social with the Sun Dogs, which are a local father and son, Mike Fleischman Jr. Music group. So they'll be playing, and they have ice cream donated by stewards along with some other refreshments. And of course, it's free, so we invite you to come out for that. And then our next big event is our Conesville Celebrates America 250. It's a collaborative event between all the organizations in town, and it is on September 19th, beginning at 4 p.m. until dark. And there are some flyers. I have some available, and it's advertised on Facebook and a whole bunch of places. The fire department, rescue squad, the church, a lot of local businesses, and a whole bunch of others, including the CREATE and the Schoharie County Historical Association, have donated their time and money to make that event possible. As part of that, we also have live music by local musician Richie Berger, which will start around 4:30-ish. And then we have a square dance in the evening at 7 o'clock. And if you have any children, we have a fantastic children's performer coming after the parade. Her name is Laurie, and she is pretty well known, and she's very dynamic. We had her here once before for a Mother's Day program, and she's just terrific. And she's going to kind of weave local history into music and dance, so that's really exciting. If you are not a member of our Historical Society and you would like to join, reach out to us, and we will get you the information. We can collect online donations now, so you'll see around the room there's QR codes, and there's a few people who can set it up so that they can just take your credit card with a phone if that's something you're interested in. Is there anything else? And I looked at Sue.
The backpack?
Sue is raffling a backpack for our America 250 celebration. So all proceeds from that will be used for that. So if you're interested, see Sue. And now, we are super excited to welcome Laurie Rankin. Laurie is going to present about New York State fire towers. She's going to talk about the history, what's going on now, and what the future holds. So let's give a warm welcome to
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out. Absolutely delightful evening. Yeah, it's a little bit warm, but think about those guys and gals in that little 7x7 box. They were a little warm from time to time as well. Here in New York State, we call them fire towers, but nationwide they are called lookouts in some locations, and in some locations they're called observatories. Our overarching organization is called the Forest Fire Lookout Association. But I assure you, they like towers too. We are a little bit about us here. Okay, well, not technical difficulties. We are an all-volunteer organization. We were formed in 1990 in Pennsylvania. We work to promote protection, enjoyment, and understanding of fire towers, and also to preserve their history. And we do that through research, through restoration, and through outreach and programs like this evening. We do provide grants for restoration work. We provide volunteer steward programs, and I would point out right away this evening some of the stewards that are here in attendance. And they will be featured. So we have Pat, Debbie, and we have Jim. And we also have another volunteer, Paula. She's not stewarded, but she certainly helped with restoration and trail work. We work on those restoration projects mostly from, I would say, May through October. One thing that's really, really difficult to do on a fire tower is work on it when it's snowy and icy and cold. We also hold conferences a couple of times a year. There is one coming up next month in September out on the West Coast. Last year we had hosted one here in Cobleskill, Richmond-Ville area, and I know the last time we hosted one in the Catskills at Mount Tremper, we did come visit Leonard Hill, and I believe that was 2019. So what I want to do tonight, I wish I had more time, but I'm going to be pretty quick, running through just sort of a timeline of how fire towers got started in New York State, how that fire tower organized and grew, and then how it kind of ended rather abruptly. And I don't think that's really ended. I think we just have different directions we're going in. So the very first fire tower in the state of New York was Balsam Lake Fire Tower. It's not very far from here. It's outside Margaretville. Anybody been there? Yeah, several people. So in that case, there was a wooden tower built. Many of them were built out of whatever local materials were available, and of course some were stone, but most in the Catskills were wood. And it was built by the private Balsam Lake Club to protect their fisheries. That's why people came to their club, was to fish. And they knew, way back in 1887, that if there was a fire that burned the trees, and then it rained, the soil was going to wash down and fill in their lake, and there went their fisheries. So they built the first one in 1887. Guess what happened? Yeah, it did. So they rebuilt it, and then that one burned. So this slide is one that I find very striking. If anyone has been in the Adirondacks on top of a mountain, it seems today to be extremely forested. But in 1903, this is what it looked like. And I always have to read from notes. I can never remember these amazing numbers. 1903, there was a 72-day drought. No rain for 72 days. Lake Champlain, which is a huge body of water, dropped 33 inches. And the first fires began to occur. Most of them were around the Lake Placid area, but cinders could be seen as far south as Albany, and 6,487 people were hired to fight these fires. The smoke went further south to New York City. In the end, ultimately 600,000 acres burned in the Adirondacks in 1903. Anybody know what happened last year to Lake Champlain? It dropped 30 inches. Really close. And what happened here, 6 weeks ago? Did we have a lot of smoke drifting in? Mm-hmm. I see a pattern, don't you? So 1903 was a really historic year. Move that ahead 5 years just to 1908, and Long Lake West burned. It is an area now called Sabattis. In Long Lake West, September 9th, guess what started the first fire? Exactly. A train started the first fire. Other men rushed out to help fight that fire. How did they get there? By train. And more sparks. And in the end, the entire town was consumed. It was evacuated, and thankfully there were no injuries to humans or animals But again, I have to read from my notes because this is so alarming. The fire melted barrels of nails into lumps. Miles of forest surrounding the town were incinerated, plus a dozen homes, the church, the school, the inn, a livery stable that housed 200 horses, which were all let loose safely, a freight warehouse with 50 barrels of kerosene and 1,500 pounds of dynamite. It actually twisted the train tracks. I was up there just yesterday, as a matter of fact, and there's a very nice forest now, but you can see how barren it looked after the Long Lake West fire. And those 2 years were the impetus for the state of New York to say, we really need to do something here about fires. So they decided they would put some people, and that's all they did at first, was put people on the top of mountains to look for fires. Well, it's great if you see smoke or if you see fire, but how are you going to tell somebody down in the valley that there's a fire? So it was a rudimentary start. Some of the things that they did initially were they put up different semaphore flags. So you'd fly something that was, say, green with a red dot to say that there was a fire to the northeast of your location. And you'd have to wait till somebody happened to look up and saw the flag, right? They used carrier pigeons. They put little notes on their legs and let them go, and hopefully they flew back to the right person so they could get out there and they could fight these fires before they got too large. So originally in 1909, they started with 9 towers, some of them on open summits, and some with wooden towers built quite crudely, as you saw on that first slide. The first steel tower didn't actually go up until 1918, and it went up on McComas, which, to tell you where that is today, it was again a private club, the Underwood Club, and it would have been seen from exit 30 of the Northway today. And you can see, it's an old photograph, but do you see on the left-hand side of the tower a gentleman climbing? The only ladder to get up to the top to watch for fires was the outside, and it went straight up. But McComas Fire Tower was found in a barn in Plattsburgh a few years ago, and it was put back up in the village of Speculator right next to the fire department. So if you want to see it, it's there. Eventually they took these towers and they built the interior staircases, which we are more used to seeing today, where you will go up a staircase, you'll hit a landing, you'll go up a staircase. It's much more enclosed and certainly much safer. I can't imagine this going up to the top of that in snow and rain. So that was the beginnings, the very rudimentary beginnings, but they had a lot of work to do to get this system really to work cohesively together. So in the 1920s, they made a lot of changes. They had standardized observers' cabins. Up until then, there was no place for an observer to get away from the elements when they were up there, and it got a little rough. So some people built little lean-tos out of pine boughs, and some people built wooden shelters, and some people carried some old lumber up. But they decided they needed standard cabins. So observers' cabins, 16 by 20 feet, were built at every fire tower. Sometimes right at the base of the tower, sometimes 1.5 miles, sometimes even 2 miles away. They gave them uniforms. Up until then, you didn't have a uniform. You wore whatever you wanted, whatever worked for the weather. So they said in the 20s, everybody's got to have a uniform. They said you have to fly the American flag when you arrive on duty as an observer and take it down at the end of your day. And then they said, oh, look at this. This piece of equipment from a company in Utica called the Indian Company will let you go out and fight a fire out in the woods. You put 40 pounds of water in that. You grab a shovel, grab an axe, grab a broom, and you can go out and you can put out a fire in the woods. So again, they're starting to get improvements. They've got these observers who see the fires early, and then once one gets started, they can get right out there and they can take care of it. The other point I have up here I think is interesting. We always say, follow the money, right? And I'll use your local area. It's Gilboa, Conesville. There's a town line somewhere. And if you can imagine, in the early years of fighting a fire, all the men in the town would have been told to go fight the fire, wherever it may be. But maybe over in Gilboa, they didn't do their paperwork very well. And, or no, I'm going to say it was over here in Conesville they didn't do their paperwork very well. So in Gilboa, you'd work till you hit the town line, and then you knew you weren't going to get paid over in Conesville, so you went back to your business and your home, and the fire got bigger. So they decided that was truly a real problem. And so they changed fire districts, fire towns into fire districts. And every fire district had a boss, a forest ranger. And that forest ranger would have several fire towers and also persons called fire wardens under them. But at least they had somebody who managed the paperwork and the money so that those people who were working so hard out there would get paid. Big change, actually, it really made a big difference. Eventually, this system continued to improve, it continued to grow. There were over 100 fire towers in the state of New York. They even had coverage during wartime. What happened in wartime often was that a gentleman was an observer, but he often had his wife and even his children with him, which was fine with the state of New York at the time. And when he went to war, she just stepped in his shoes. And so there was good coverage even during wartime. Through the years, they identified a few problems, and I've got some real good slides to show you regarding Leonard Hill about this. But they realized that this fire tower over here and this fire tower over here could look and cover, but they couldn't see this spot in the middle. So they identified those blank spots where nobody was covering. And so what they do oftentimes was they just move a fire tower. Now remember, they didn't have cranes. And they didn't have any of the modern equipment we do now, but they just simply took a fire tower down off a mountaintop, carried it down, and put it back up on another mountaintop because they didn't want those blank spots. Public relations was a big part of the work. Up until then, the visitors to the forest rarely saw somebody out there. And when there was an observer in that fire tower, they suddenly had somebody whom they could talk to. And that person could talk to them about fire prevention. They could talk to them about the next place to camp. They could talk to them about who the forest ranger was to get a burn permit from. These people, these observers, really did a lot of public relations as well. And so that's another reason why this fire tower system grew so well. And then there was a lot of changes that we made. I call them societal changes. Hey, how many people know Smokey? Everybody knows Smokey. It was one of the most successful public service campaigns in history. Smokey even has his own zip code, you know? But it was very helpful. It really told the public about what they could do to do their part in preventing wildfires. And it was extremely successful. They tried to get rid of them a couple times, you know. It didn't work. Planes. Prior to World War I, there weren't planes in the air. But then planes became more prevalent in the air, and they had two things that were really good. One was they had communication, and the other thing is they had a huge view shed. And so planes began to be something that became a little bit of a part of this fire tower and fire prevention system. The communications, thanks to the war, particularly after World War II, improved immensely. Prior to World War II, most fire towers were served by phone lines, and an observer had to manage their phone line, keep it working at all times. But they went to radios. They did a lot of work around the state to make sure that they really would work, and they did. We ourselves made changes. We didn't need, if there was a fire, we didn't need to go by train anymore. We had automobiles. We had trucks out there. Our logging practices changed. In the early years, 1903 and 1908, there was a lot of logging going on in the forests, but those practices had completely changed by the time we got to, say, the 40s, 50s, and 60s. How did we heat our home in 1903 and 1908? Well, with an open fire. That's how we heated our businesses. By the time we got to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we were doing things like we have furnaces that are run by electric, by oil, different things. So the way we heated our homes was much less dangerous. We used to burn our trash. I remember as a little girl, we burned leaves, and I could get paid $0.25 for raking up my grandparents' leaves, and I'd rake them into the ditch, which would presumably have water in it. And so my grandfather would set them on fire and take care of the leaves. Well, we don't do that anymore, do we? So a lot of things have changed. One thing that changed also was government policy. The federal government and the state government had a policy that if a fire was discovered, it would be put out by 10 a.m. the next day. And all services were put towards that fire to get it out by 10 a.m. But then they said, man, remember the 70s with Yellowstone? And they said, let it burn. And we saw those pictures on our television screens of the beautiful Yellowstone Park on fire. That was the beginnings of the, if it does not affect businesses and homes, just let it burn. Fire is a natural thing. So we have a lot of things that were happening, and they all led back to the money. And there came a time, my dad was the fire tower observer at Balsam Lake, and he expected to work every year the 1st of April through at least the 1st of November, sometimes later. And he would get called into the New Paltz office in middle to late March with his marching orders for the year for work, who was going to be his ranger, etc. And he didn't get called. Just like that, the funds dried up, and they didn't man the fire towers one spring. And that started happening through the 70s. So, again, follow that money. So that's kind of the end of the fire towers. Eventually, by 1990, all the fire towers in the state of New York were done watching for smoke and letting people know about fires. The state of New York kind of abandoned them. They didn't really know what to do with them. So some parts of the state said, oh, that's really dangerous, what a liability. We can't leave that fire tower standing. So they said, let's go up and take it down. So they sent helicopters up there, they sent personnel on the ground to dismantle it, to hook it up to the helicopter, take it off, and pretty soon they said, whoa, we don't have any money for that. We can't do that. So then they said, well, here's a funny story. They said to the military, can you help us out? And the military went up in the Adirondacks, and they took down one fire tower, the T Lake Fire Tower. And I've not seen anything written about that. I only know that that was the only tower the military was involved with removing. So I'm not sure how that went down. I have visited the site, and there's nothing left there but 4 concrete footers. So they said, okay, let's sell these towers. So they put them up for sale to the highest bidder. And there were a lot of towers out there that you could bid $5 on, and you could bid $15 on, and you could bid $20, and you sold to you for $20. The only thing you have to do is you have to take it down yourself, and you have to take it down by a certain date. So a lot of these fire towers were, in fact, taken down, and they went to some person somewhere. There was very little record keeping, and there may still be some in somebody's backyard or barn today. I don't know. Just like with McComas, it was just found. So I do want to focus on your fire tower, Leonard Hill. But Leonard Hill wasn't always there. It started out in Gilbert Lake. It is an 80-foot tall fire tower, which is fairly tall for this area. There were 2 different models of fire towers generally in the state of New York. One was Aeromotor, and that was made by a company out in Chicago that usually made windmill towers, and they just adjusted their plans a little bit and they made these fire towers. The other company was the International Derrick Company, and that were ones that made the bases to oil derricks. And again, they adjusted it a little bit for fire towers. So the one in Gilbert Lake, which was put up by the CCC, was this 80-foot Aeromotor LS-40 model. It was staffed during dry periods through 1941, but then there was no records of it being staffed from 41 to 48. So in 1947, they decided to move it to Hubbard Hill, Leonard Hill. There seems to be some discrepancies over that. How many people understand that here? Yeah. This is the only picture I have of the tower at Gilbert Lake, and this is actually a postcard. I'm sorry for the background on the slide. I've really struggled to get that to copy, but that is in its original location. So remember we talked before about movable towers and how they'd actually slide one over. So from 38 to 40, the Conservation Department did this visibility study so they could figure out where they had those blank spots we talked about. And then, just as they got the results of that study, World War II broke out. And New York State Parks decided that Gilbert Lake needed to move. So that had been sitting there with nobody using it for a long time, and there was another tower called Hooker Hill, which was kind of out in the Skinevus-Worcester area, to the east of Oneonta, and they felt like Hooker Hill had pretty good coverage. So they packed up Gilbert Lake, which was the red, and they moved it to the right-hand side of the screen. I believe, I'm not sure if I'm going to say this, 31 miles, maybe 41 miles. I might have it in my next slide. But they decided to just simply move that to Leonard/Hubbard Hill. But you can see by this next slide, once it was moved, there's some pretty darn good coverage now. The red one is Leonard Hill. The purple circle is Mount Azienda. The black one is Bramley. That light blue one is Rock Rift outside of Walton. And then the orange one is Page Pond by Deposit. And they pretty much so line up along the Delaware River Valley. So you can see how much better the coverage was with that. So according to the state's records, the tower at Hubbard Hill in the town of Broome would have a cabin and 3 miles of telephone line, a 1.5 mile truck trail from the main highway to the tower, and I believe this was done by the Livingstonville Camp, CCC Camp. Does anyone have any confirmation of that who happens to be here? It's one of those vague things. But in 1957, the state said this tower would have one of the best visibility and coverage of forest lands anywhere in the district, and could be seen almost anywhere in Schoharie County. And due to that extensive coverage, as well as triangulating with Petersburg and Hacienda, it should be manned. So the state really went to bat for having this tower. This was a Mirror Recorder article where state officials were here during the week looking at the large farm of Dr. Leonard. And that would have been the main Leonard Hill State Forest and the purchase of that. And then this article from 46 is about them putting the fire tower up there. It says the tower was going to be connected by phone with the New York Telephone Company line down in Conesville. The state now owns this large area, Dr. Leonard's farm being the creator of it. These are the observers who served at Leonard Hill. You can see some of them served for a very long time and some did not. Sometimes just sitting on a mountaintop did not agree with everyone. And sometimes people really loved it. You'll actually notice here that Mr. Dyson was on, he was off, and he was on again. And I do actually have a record somewhere that I saw. Are you here?
His wife and daughter are here.
Oh, very good. Thank you and welcome.
They probably can help you out.
There was a political issue, correct?
He was the wrong party.
And that truly happened.
Yes, and our supervisor of the town said to him, "This isn't right, I'm going to get your job back." So him and Lloyd Austin and Charlie McAllister went to Albany to the Attorney General's office. It took a year, as you could see, but
Yes.
he got his job back.
Yes, that was very real. Remember when I said that, you often, the observers didn't hear until like March that they got their marching orders for the year. And if the governor had changed from, say, Democrat to Republican, and you were not a Democrat, that new Democratic governor may have a nephew, they may have a son, they may have a brother who needed a job. So sorry, you're out. It was. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for coming. It was real. You had these people who were so dedicated to this job, and then things like this did happen. I love this photograph. On our website, you will find we have numerous historical photographs, which we are so appreciative of having been donated to us. And this one I really love because you can see the Leonard Hill Fire Tower base in the background on the right. You see the tower, you see the woodshed in the back. It's just a welcome, isn't it? Isn't it just a photograph that says welcome? I'm here taking care of everything, and I'd like to take care of you too while you're here. Yes?
We lived there.
Yes?
The girls were 2 and 4.
Yep.
We lived there while he was working.
Yeah. And the state of New York was actually very good about having wives and families at the fire towers. It was very accepted. I'm not so sure it would be today. And this is a photograph that I really like of the fire tower in 1987. And part of the reason why I like it is it does have that telephone pole and the telephone line right in front of it. Because there was always a telephone line for communication that went to the cabin and the fire tower both. Because if the observer was needed and they were not in the fire tower, which, you know, sometimes they had to come down, they could be reached. And this is a climbing card. Traditionally, when visitors came and climbed the fire tower, the observer would give you a card which said you had climbed the fire tower. It said where it was located, it said the elevation, and the observer would sign it. And this is Mr. Dyson in the fire tower where he signed the card for Mr. Eckler. And we have a lot of Mr. Eckler's photographs in our collection. And I love the photograph because you have the map and you have the binoculars. I don't see the phone in that particular picture, but I guarantee you there was one in there too, because those were the three tools that the observer used. The tower was decommissioned at the end of the 1986 season. And I thought these were a couple of other interesting notes. From 48 to 57, it was only operated on a need-to-need basis, which basically means during times of high fire danger. And from 66 to 86, it operated fully. And the first three observers' salaries, we did find the payroll records. So the first years, they got paid $114.44 every 2 weeks. Woo! But look at that. By the time you got to the third observer, it was all the way up to $147.88. And yet these people were so important to their local community. They looked over it. They protected your homes, your businesses, your schools, your churches, and your forest. And they were well-respected people because they did that, but they didn't get paid bucks. These were forest rangers who supervised the observers at Leonard Hill. And I know my dad did get to work with Jerry Ham and Pete Rossi a bit. Over at Balsam Lake, there was a demarcation line right across the base of the tower where you were in Region 4 out of Stanford or you were in Region 3 out of New Paltz. And so it depended on what my dad was assigned to do, where he was. So what about the future of Leonard Hill? Well, I can tell you that we've been up there a lot of times, and we just see so much potential at this fire tower. And in September of 2018, one of our volunteer stewards here, Jim and I, went up and we met with 3 people from the state of New York at the tower. One of them, they said, give it back to Gilbert Lake. We don't want it. The other 2 said, well, why don't we do an engineering study and see what's really wrong with the tower, and then we'll make a decision. Well, from 2018 to 2023, there was still no engineer's report. But the state in 2023 did a few minor repairs. Anybody who's been up there will notice that they had repaired the floor. They did a little work on the road. And I thought, ooh, there is an engineer's report out there that somebody's got a glimpse of, and maybe they're going to do something. So in March of 2024, believe me, I have a little timer set on my calendar to bug the state of New York every 6 months or so. So in March of 2024, I was told, and I quote this, the DEC engineers have begun work on determining what needs to be done to rehab Leonard Hill. They anticipate having a scope of work completed in May, and following that, we'll be working with a contractor and complete the necessary repairs. Yes! I was so happy. It was like, it's finally going to happen. Well, Then there was September of 24, and they said, well, we're waiting now to see how things pan out with Gilbert Lake. We recently heard from them that they would not be interested in moving the tower, so we have a scope of work and a cost estimate, and work will commence next summer, as the contractor's been tied up working on BB Hill Fire Tower. And I will say, the BB Hill Fire Tower was completed and reopened in November of 24, and it's awesome. Absolutely wonderful. So then we went from 2024 to 2025, and I said, hey, I don't see anything happening up there. And they said, yes, there's been a delay in the plan because the contractor's work on BB Hill was delayed. Well, this is July of 25, and BB Hill was reopened in November of 24. So it wasn't quite working for me. So I reached out again in October. No update, unfortunately. They say we're at the mercy of the contractor, who was done at BB Hill. So I reached out again 2 weeks ago while I was preparing for this, and this one I still haven't figured out. It says, I spoke with operations at the start of the season about starting Leonard Hill, and I was told we had already reached the limit on how many projects and how much money we can assign to our job order contracting system contractor for 1 year. Don't you either have a contractor or you don't? I don't know. She went on to say, however, I recently spoke with one of the central office engineers and he asked about the status, and I'm hoping I can line things up and we can get this under the cap next year. So maybe 2028, which will be a full 10 years since our first visit, there is a possibility of restoring Leonard Hill. And we don't intend to restore it and leave it there abandoned. We, in 2021, submitted an application to be the caretakers of the Leonard Hill Fire Tower and to provide a steward presence there, because we do think it's very important and very valuable to have stewards there. They're not observers, they're not looking for fires, but they are there, they are a presence. There's a whole lot less shenanigans that go on when there's somebody there. And they are all well trained, they are in uniform. They are awesome, and every one of them is a volunteer. Every one of them. So what do they get to do? Well, they get to spend the day on a mountaintop, which I gotta say is something I would just love to do. They attend training, they get their uniform, they can sign up for the days of their choice. Nobody says, okay, you have to work this Monday and not Saturday. You work whenever you wish. You can arrive at Leonard Hill either by driving up or by having a nice little walk through the woods. And you'll greet the public. You'll educate them about fire towers and their history, which we don't want to lose. You'll share local information. You'll share information about Leave No Trace. And Hike Safe, which is where people take care of themselves and they take care of the woods around them. We also engage in light duty cleanup to keep the area welcoming for everyone. So they're going to pick up trash. If they see something that's a real problem, they of course would let me know, and we'll let DEC know. They would take care of it. So here's a few of our stewards. This is Michelle, smiling at a fire tower out in Shenango County. There's Pat and Debbie. They are surrounded by happy children. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those happy children and things that they do. This was at Cane Mountain Fire Tower in the southern Adirondacks. This was a group of 3rd through 5th graders. And there's Jim. He's under the tower with a whole group of people from our last conference when we visited the Cane Mountain Fire Tower. We think Leonard Hill has the potential to be a fantastic place for school children to visit. We actually provide schools grades 3 through 5 with a curriculum which meets core standards. It comes with a teacher's guide, it comes with a student handbook. I come into the classroom with many of the same props that you'll see here and provide a classroom informative session for the kids, and then we go on field trips like what you saw up at Kane. Great place for scout trips, for 4-H trip. Stargazing, I think you'd have to do it at the top of the first hill where the trees are a little bit more open. But we have a very successful stargazing program every fall out at Berry Hill in Shenango County. We had close to 50 people last year. It's a great place for birding. Amateur radio folks already go up to Leonard Hill. Just grab a picnic, picnic dinner and hang out up there and watch the sunset. There's a lot of bike trails in the area up there. And we've been up there and we've talked to a lot of the biking community, and they seem to be really, really in favor of this. You can hunt there. We've had some people who expressed some concern about interference with hunting, and we have suggested to the DEC that we can close it for hunting season as far as visiting the tower and as far as having stewards there. We do this in 3 other fire towers around the state, and it works quite well. There's primitive camping up there, snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. That forest is beautiful. You do have to walk a little bit further because of the road closures. There's selective timber harvesting that goes on, so it's a great example of how the state of New York does that. And it preserves our history. And Leonard Hill is an accessible site, and we don't have a lot of those. But now I want to look at the larger picture again. Wildfires are growing. They're growing in size, and they are certainly growing in cost. And if anybody watches the news, whether it's on a social media feed or on your television, you know this to be true. The fall of 2024 was the largest and most recent fire in New York State. And that was on the New York-New Jersey border and burned 6,000 acres. A young firefighter lost his life. Many parts of Sterling Forest are still closed today. New Jersey fire tower spotted that. And the New Jersey governor has suggested that if Sterling Forest fire tower was manned in New York State, they may have seen it first. And he is really pointing the finger at New York State for the head start that this fire got. And they have still not announced the cost of this fire. Many states across the United States still do use fire towers for fire spotting purposes. And they use both paid and volunteer staff. And this includes our neighbors in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. There's one going right now on Rattlesnake Mountain in New Hampshire. They man their towers during fire danger. Massachusetts still mans their towers during fire danger. In 2019, this was the most excellent conversation I've had. I spoke with a forester from Pennsylvania, and he said we did the math. It was very, very simple. Pennsylvania is a very forested state. They really support their hunters and their fisheries. And they looked at how much a major wildfire would cost them in the loss of their fisheries, their hunting, and in the manpower that they would spend. And they said, you know what? It makes sense to build some fire towers and to man them. And so in 2019, they coughed up $4.6 million, and they built 19 new fire towers. They manned them from 11 to 6 every day, which I thought was interesting because my dad always worked 8 to 5. Is that right? He worked about 8 to 5 every day.
Yeah, I think so.
But in Pennsylvania, they said in the morning, everything is still dewy and wet, so they don't have people coming on until 11. but they have them stay until 6 in the evening, which I found interesting. The public is not invited to climb these fire towers, which is another different thing. So I gotta say, sorry Pennsylvania, great idea, but gosh, they're ugly. These fire towers are so over-engineered. The staircases on them are 4 feet wide, and then you get up top to the catwalk with the thing in, the cab inside, and it's like, wow. I mean, they're built, I think, to like cell tower standards or something. So they're not my favorite. The front cover of one of the magazines I brought has the latest New Jersey tower. New Jersey was going to lose one of their towers because of some kind of a failure, and they immediately put a new one up in its place. They weren't going to take one out of their system. So these are all purposes that we see for fire towers. They are still a major source of communication, particularly in our really rugged and wild Adirondacks. There cannot be any cell towers on forest preserve land, but there are fire towers there. And so they have put radio relays on them, which are powered by solar panels. And not only are they used for search and rescue, they are also used by state police, they are used by county sheriff's office, they are used by school buses. Because if you've got a school bus in one valley and you've got a school in another valley, that just does not bounce over those mountains. But it will bounce up to the fire tower and repeat back down. They also use them for town highway workers as well to communicate these radio repeaters. But you gotta maintain those towers. Gotta maintain them. They could still be used for fire spotting, our towers could, if we continue with the kind of dry times we're seeing. They could be used as long as they're maintained. Tourism, these towers are a really big draw. Is anybody here familiar with the Brownlee Mountain Fire Tower going up in Delhi? It's a huge draw. There were trails on the mountain prior to the fire tower going up, and those numbers have doubled, or perhaps even tripled. Jim, you're actually a steward there, right? Yes.
And yes, the local businesses, restaurants, and stores love it.
Yeah, yeah. Historical preservation, again, there's some certain standards that have to be met, but you're saving this piece of history to your town. And then the educational opportunities that we have are just a wide variety of them. So a lot of people say to me, okay, great, Laurie, what can I do? I don't have any particular skills. Oh, I bet you do. I bet you have some kind of a skill. And it may be nothing that comes to mind with like rebuilding a fire tower, but you might actually have the best chocolate chip cookie recipe in town. And if we've got a bunch of volunteers up there working on the fire tower and you bring them chocolate chip cookies, it is a gift, a very important gift. You may be somebody who paints. There's a little paint on my skirt. It's silver paint, you may have noticed. I paint. I'm not a good painter, but I can paint a fire tower, and I have. I wouldn't call myself a painter. So you may very well be able to contribute in some manner. We just need to chat about it. So let me know if you're interested. I'm sure you certainly could contribute. I want to talk briefly about our upcoming event. This year we'll be having our 13th annual Lighting of the Fire Tower event on Labor Day weekend, the Saturday night of Labor Day weekend, the 5th at 8:30. Fire towers all around New York State will put a light on. And we are inviting people to go to different places in their community where they can look up and they can see that light come on. And they can remember those people who served in that fire tower and how important they were to that community. We have people who are just taking this and they have been running with it for the last 13 years. There's one tower in the Adirondacks. They have dinner, and then you go down to the lakeside and you have dessert, and you can look right across and see the light come on the fire tower. We have all kinds of fun things that are happening. So the information about what towers are participating and where you can see them is all on our website. And if it rains, oh, we don't like rain on us. If it rains, we'll be doing it Sunday night. I do want to give a special shout out of thanks to all the people who have contributed to this. We have had an awful lot of people who have helped us out. Retired Forest Ranger Paul Hartman, his collection of photographs on our website is amazing. Author Marty Podscotch, who has written 3 fire tower books in New York State, has donated all of his items to us. We are still working to get them all scanned. Past FFLA directors Fred Knopf and Bill Starr provided a lot of historical information, as did the Stanford historian. Karen was the one who provided me with those Mirror Recorder news articles. And of course, our volunteers, our stewards and our volunteers who work, we couldn't do this without them. They are what really makes it happen. So I do want to show a couple of these items here, but I would take questions if you've got any right now. Yes?
Sam Brown, I grew up down the hill from that tower on Fort Anchor.
Nice.
And I'm wondering what sort of protection there is from lightning strikes.
Good question. All towers are grounded. As a general rule, there's grounding wires that are buried right to the ground. But, no, you shouldn't be on a fire tower or near it during lightning. In Marty's book, there's actually a story, I think it was observer Ken Greek, who tried like a rubber mat, and then he stayed in the tower during a lightning storm, and he said, it was great. I was fine, nothing happened. Until 2 weeks later when all his hair fell out.
Oh my God.
So yes, a big concern.
Okay, I have a second question.
Yes,
So you said town of Broome for location of the Leonard Hill Tower.
yes.
I'm not a surveyor, but I grew up thinking it was in the town of Gilboa and part of the property was in Conesville. Am I mistaken on that?
I can't answer that, I'm sorry. I have not studied a map that closely to answer that. I do know that there has been, historically, a lot of question about exactly where this is, Hubbard Hill and Leonard Hill, etc. So I'm really not sure where those property lines are.
Thanks.
Yes.
Is Atsianta fire, is that, you didn't talk about that tonight?
Yeah, Atsianta is part of the fire tower system. It is a new for us this year. We have an agreement with the village of Stanford to have a steward presence there. We've been a little slow on getting everybody around, but we've been doing that up there. It needs a little help. It needs some paint, some wire, etc.
I'm assuming that Leonard Hill is not accessible, is that correct?
The tower itself won't be accessible, but the site is accessible, so
I
you
meant
can
the
get.
tower.
Yeah.
Now, the DEC has this Catskill Mountain Fire Tower Challenge.
Yes.
Leonard Hill is not among them. Do you
Correct.
anticipate that when it is restored, that it would join that group?
I have to say I don't know. And the reason I don't know is I was quite surprised, honestly, when Bramley and Atsianta were added to the challenge.
Because they're outside the park.
Because they're outside the park and they're not DEC properties.
Right.
So I'm not sure what criteria the state used, so I really don't know. I mean, Leonard Hill is on state property. It is a state tower, but I don't know.
It is a state tower. Oh.
It is.
And it's in the park?
Well, it's not in the park, but it's in a state forest. So, but I don't know what criteria they used. Yes?
My question is not related to this area,
Uh-huh.
but I wondered if you were familiar, probably about 25 years ago, Storm King Mountain in Orange County burned for many weeks.
Yes.
And, you could smell the smoke for probably 30, 40 miles around. And then as we would travel over the mountain, you could see the devastation of the trees. It's just, I don't know if you have any experience with that.
I would say very limited, honestly, but we have worked, the FFLA has worked on restoration at Sterling Fire Tower and Jackie Jones. Jackie Jones is there in Harriman Park. There are quite a number of fire towers in the Hudson Valley, but again, none of them would have been active at this time because the topography is such on places like Storm King and the Mohonk Preserve through the Shwangunks and the Hudson Valley, the topography, the vegetation, when it gets started, it goes. And you really, really want to get a stop on things very quickly. Yeah, it's just a dangerous thing down there.
It's amazing to see how the trees grow back. I mean, even through here, coming up on Durham Road, I was quite devastated when I saw all the trees that they had cut several years back. But now, you see, it doesn't take long before the forest starts to grow back. And so I'm thinking that when there is a fire, it's sort of a renewal process.
Yes, and I think that thought process has become a little bit more agreeable to a lot of people, but not to everyone. And there are many places in our Forever Wild Forest Preserve area where there's a lot of fuel load that's built up for a long time. I do know that there was one of the last large fires in the Shwangunks. They closed the area for a year. It was down by Sam's Point, and they closed the area for a year to let it regrow. And I was amazed when I went back on year 2, and I saw what was growing already. And then I've gone back on year 3, and wow, it's doing okay. It really is. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Yes, I remember the fire at Gilboa, Leonard Hill.
You
Tower.
do?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I, late husband and I, drove up there. He was yanked out of the car, given one of those containers and a shovel, and he fought the fire for 2 days.
Yes.
Apparently, Louis Flores was in the tower, did not see the fire behind him. Mount Utsienta spotted it and called him and said, "There's smoke behind you." And when Louis turned around, everything was on fire.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do remember that.
And it really, that's part of the reason why the system was so important, because what one might miss or might not be able to see, another one could. Let me show you a couple things. The original maps in Fire Tower were just like your driving maps, a little square folded up. You might have 6 or 8 of them. And if your fire or your smoke was right on the edge of the map, you would unfold one map and then you'd unfold another, and then geez, you'd have to turn it this way and that. And finally somebody said, we can see all the way around in a circle. So why don't we make a circular map? And the very first circular maps were made with what we term as panoramics, where there was just mountain shapes around the outside edge that you could look at. And then eventually they used real contour maps so that you could really tell what you were looking at. And you could see that they would go from 0 to 360 degrees, just like a compass. And then this was your sighting device called an alidade. It was made out of brass, so it didn't bend, it didn't warp. And when you saw something, you could sight right down this. You could say that you were seeing smoke at 310 degrees, then you could call your next nearest fire towers. And for them, that smoke would be at a different angle from their alleyway, and then yet another angle. So then, you call your boss, the forest ranger. Now don't laugh, we do this with kids, remember? And we have to make it so kids understand. So, we actually do have it in the code here. But this is the Delaware River, right? It's blue for kids. And we've got a fire right alongside the river. See it there? So Bramley sees it, and we don't put degrees on here for the kids. We put northeast, south, and west. So it's to the east, southeast from Bramley, from Balsam Lake. From Balsam Lake, it's to the northeast, and when Mount New sees it, it's to the southwest. But where those three lines meet is triangulation. And that's why this system and these maps work so well together. You could pinpoint that and you could get right to it. The forest ranger could send himself and the right fire department and the right resources there. You would have to call on the phone. You know, this is a real modern phone. We take this when we have the kids to our in our programs. They will go. You know, but it's good. They get to see that. We use our binoculars. That was just these three tools were what was in that small 7x7 cal for that observer to use. We do have Smoky Bear items. We would definitely like people to take these items. We get our volunteers give them out. This is a real favorite. And you know what? The thing about this is, I swear, we have not picked one of these up. It's trash. Not one. Not one. The kids absolutely love these. We have wristbands, we have stickers, and we have tattoos, which are
Removable.
This was a really lovely poem written by Observer at Balsam Lake before my dad. And my mother used one of my dad's uniforms and his patch to frame it. If you want to look at that. Here is the Indian tank. It was made in Utica. It has lovely venting on the back. and it has wonderful padding straps with buckets that bite right in. And you can see this really was a very, very small amount of water that would come out. If you had to go up in the woods, you would not only have this 40 pounds of water, but you would have shovels, you would have brooms, something was burning up high, you'd have an axe, so you could chop it down and get to it. That was really hard work. Really grueling hard work. And I'll tell you, it hasn't improved a whole lot. My grandson was at the Jennings Creek fire, that 6,000 acre fire. And you're still using a lot of the same tools. There are some improvements, of course, in things like communication. They actually communicated with a forest ranger boss, and if they had a problem, they could text them, you know. I mean, there are some things that are different, but some things really are still the same. I would encourage you to come and take a look. Our national newsletter is this beautiful quarterly magazine that comes out, if you remember. This is the new New Jersey Fire Tower on the front cover of this one. These are all kind of just to look. And this one is Bramley Mountain on the cover. So New York State gets a lot of play inside and outside. And then I have every month a New York State monthly newsletter that goes out. I always say on about the 15th to the 17th. I haven't gotten this one. I'm giving myself a little We have a photography contest, and this was the winner this particular month. We put historical photos in here, and we talk about what's happening in New York State. I do have a few, there's a couple of books here. I have a few things here that I thought may be of interest, but they don't always, old photographs don't always scan well. But here we have, from Marty's collection, this is Forest Ranger Pete Rossi. This is a picture of Lewis Observer. This is the postcard. Oh, this is Louis Flores' family inside the cabin. And you'll notice the inside of the cabin has, they were beautiful inside. Knotty pine paneling, just gorgeous inside. And I always ask a question or two. If anybody would please look at this photograph. This was in Marty's folder.
That's Dr. Leonard's house.
That's
What is
Dr. Leonard.
That's Dr. Leonard's house.
Thank you, because see, there was nothing.
Oh, get it on there.
I'm so glad that you spoke up, and I'm so glad I brought that. Wow, what a house.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow,
that was 3 stories.
wow. Oh, thank you.
No.
Still there?
Wow. You didn't know when it was torn down?
It was burnt, didn't it burn?
Yeah.
It burned.
Oh, it burned.
Also burned down
Yeah.
Did he have a
There's
quarantine
also
fee
5
like that?
cemeteries on the way.
A quarantine
On the road
fee.
to,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think it's 5, isn't it, Laurie?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I went with your mom on the tour.
Wow.
And there's 5 cemeteries up on the road
Yes.
alongside.
Yeah, wow. This was a report form that an observer had to fill out every day. It had the weather, if there was a fire, and then this got folded up and mailed into your office, your district office. This,
Were in those reports, did they keep track of visitors?
yes, yes, it did. I don't have the right glasses for that,
Borrow mine.
but I'm pretty certain that they did.
They save all those reports, or they're like records of the, yeah?
I hope they have, now I have all of my ads, because they would check when they got it and recorded it and give them back. I give them back to his range when they're in the.
Okay, so it might not have been saved then if it wasn't contained by the agency.
Yeah. So I'm not positive, but some of the fire tower stuff, and to the best of my knowledge, there's no rhyme or reason to it. There were people who loved fire towers. They were very sad to see them go. And when they seemed to neglect anything like, say, the fire tower map, people would scarf them up and take them home and take care of them. There were other people who said, I don't care about this. I think I'm throwing them in the trash. And they did. I got a call a couple of years ago from Forrester up in Northville office, and he said, Laurie, I gotta tell you, this is so funny, but we had to change a light bulb. And they had the ceiling kind of like this, and when they were on top of the ladder to change their light bulb and started to lose their balance, they pushed one of those little fiberglass panels to the side, and they saw something rounded. And it was the original fire tower map for Cane Mountain Fire.
Wow.
So he's let me borrow that several times when I'm doing presentations, and it is there at the office. You just never know what you're going to find and when you're going to find it. This was another treasure that I thought I would share with everybody, and you can come and look at it. So every fire tower had permanent smokes visible. And they were from a business that was often providing smoke. And so in the case of the Leonard Hill Fire Tower, they had a lot. They had the Ravina Cement Plant, the House Cave Cement Plant, the Timberland Charcoal Plant, and then they had Grangord, Prattsville, Conesville, Jefferson, Richmondville, Seward, Sharon Springs, Esperance, Middleburg, Westerlo dumps, which they would burn. fortunate to come across that.
Yeah.
But thank you all, gosh, you've been really attentive, thank you all so much for coming. I do have just a blank piece of paper on a clipboard, if anyone is interested in, keeping up to date on Leonard Hill. As I hear something, in the years ahead, I would certainly be happy to let you know.
Thank you, Laurie. He's the mover and the shaker, this lady. She makes it happen.
Remember, I wasn't